0.0233 seconds. That's the margin Felix Rosenqvist won the 2026 Indy 500 by. Any small change or mishap could have completely changed the result, but would you believe it if I told you, way back, a small change almost took him out of the series? This change had nothing to do with results, nothing to do with performance, and it was all out of his control and in the hands of a contract dispute. So how did a man almost go from being pushed out of IndyCar to winning the biggest prize of all? It all started back in 2019 when Felix Rosenqvist joined the IndyCar grid with Chip Ganassi Racing. Rosenqvist boasted a pretty large resume for a rookie, competing in multiple F3 series, Indy Lights, DTM, Formula E, and Super Formula, all of which he did very well in, with the standout being a 2-win, 3-pole season in Formula E in the 2017/2018 year. Rosenqvist actually saw Formula E as a long-term possibility, but when IndyCar came calling, he just couldn't turn down the offer, and as a result, he signed a multi-year deal with Ganassi to replace Ed Jones after some testing. 2019 treated Felix pretty well, as not only did he win the Rookie of the Year competition over names like Colton Herta, Marcus Ericsson, and Santino Ferrucci, but he did it by finishing 6th in the standings, above other race winners and veterans of the series. That high momentum kind of carried into 2020, which was less consistent, but had a bigger high point, where Rosenqvist captured the first win of his career, and the only one up until a week ago, and it came at Road America, where Rosenqvist passed his future teammate Padua Ward on the second to last lap, and ended up winning by almost 3 seconds. Other than that, the year was a bit less fortunate, as Rosenqvist ended the championship in 11th, with a lot lower results than the season prior. But before the end of the year, a big bombshell hit the headlines. In October of 2020, it was announced that Felix Rosenqvist would leave Chip Ganassi Racing to go to Aero McLaren in 2021. He would then be replaced at Ganassi by Alex Palou, which in this whole shift is very ironic considering what comes later in the story. Anyways, Felix to McLaren was exciting. It provided a lineup of 2 young yet proven talents in himself and Padua Ward, and it came in a team that was on an incredible upturn and had tons of racing history around the globe. But coincidentally, that's what bites back later. The first few years at McLaren were alright. In 2021, Rosenqvist honestly got blown out of the water by Padua Ward, who finished 283 points ahead, but it was a year of adjustment that included a large crash in Detroit that caused Rosenqvist to miss 2 races. But 2022 did treat him better. He had a much better run and finished 8th in the standings, his highest since his rookie year, and stood on the podium once again in Toronto. It was a career-defining year that showed that Rosenqvist was deserving of his seat, or so you'd think, as going into the offseason, this is where the big bomb was set off, and although it shaped Rosenqvist's career, it actually had very little to do with him. In 2022, the debacle had to do with the Aero McLaren team, Rosenqvist's current team, and Chip Ganassi Racing, his old team, along with Alex Palou, the guy who replaced him previously, and was about to do the same thing again. The whole thing was very messy, but the short explanation of it was, Palou would move to McLaren's IndyCar team while also serving reserve duties for their F1 team. But the discourse came because Palou thought he'd get a guaranteed F1 seat when McLaren didn't want to give that guarantee. When this misunderstanding occurred, no one really knew what would happen because Palou had already signed his contract with McLaren, but was actively backing out of it to stay at Ganassi. Now for Rosenqvist, he was the guy that Palou would replace if he did go to McLaren. So with Palou's future uncertain, that also meant Rosenqvist's future was uncertain. And the truth is, it was through no doing of his own. Now here's where it gets even more complicated, because amid all of this uncertainty, McLaren wanted to keep Rosenqvist on the team as a fallback option, and wanted to extend him just in case. So they did that, but with a catch. Conveniently, 2023 was the year that McLaren's Formula E program was launching, and Rosenqvist had success there in the past. So what McLaren did was they extended Rosenqvist to a contract under the blanket team of McLaren, not specifying the series in which he'd race. This ultimately left Rosenqvist in a position where the series he would race in was up to them, not him. The irony of the situation was that everything was linked to his past, where he'd raced 3 seasons in Formula E prior, but Felix made it very clear he wanted to stick around in IndyCar, calling it a very addictive environment, and saying the relationships he built in IndyCar were the biggest reason he didn't want to leave. Rosenqvist was told by Zach Brown that if he could find another ride in IndyCar, he he would be willing to release him to let him go there, but the job market wasn't great. Names like Alex Palou, Rinus VeeKay, and Scott Dixon were already having rumors circling about their futures, so there was less interest in Felix. But just imagine it. He performed well, but his future was decided by people arguing about another person's contract. Now, during the long drawn-out deal, a resolution of the court case was not found quite yet, but a decision on how the future would go was. Rosenqvist was able to stay with McLaren for 2023, luckily, but geez did it get close. He raced alongside Pato O'Ward and the team's new third entry, Alexander Rossi. The fact that Felix really picked up the pace in 2022 was what really helped his case in securing the seat, and his current form made it hard to justify replacing him or moving him to another series. The deal lasted for 1 year only, and Rosenqvist did pretty well during it. A 12th in the standings was made as the standout performance was a P2 in Portland, but in comparison to his teammates, Rosenqvist finished behind them both, and he searched for a new, longer-term opportunity in the future, and that led him to his current employer, Meyer Shank. Now, I've already made a video about Meyer Shank's origins and their history in IndyCar, but they're a generally new team to Indy, and Rosenqvist was a big signing for them to land. At the time, Shank was a two-car team with only one race win in the past, a 2021 Indy 500 win, but they had attained significant Honda backing, as well as more investment from Liberty Media, so things were on and up. The team was known in the past as the team that made the most out of everything though, and they really catered to their drivers, so it was really interesting what was going to be possible. The first year at Shank was already an improvement, and although there was no difference in the standings, at Meyer Shank, Rosenqvist took on the team leader role as he was more experienced than both of his teammates that he had throughout the season in Tom Blomqvist and David Malukas. He was also extremely strong, specifically in qualifying, as he claimed Meyer Shank's first ever pole position in Long Beach. For 2025, he made an even bigger jump forward after starting the season 4th in points after 3 races and continued form at Road America, where he tied MSR's best non-Indy 500 result of P2. Now that leads us to this year, where it's safe to say that things are on an upturn, and starting out the year, Felix earned another pole at Long Beach, and had a bit of a rough start to May, crashing on lap 1 at the IMS road course, but we all know what happens next, the Indy 500. Going into the Indy 500, Felix Rosenqvist was regarded pretty highly, but by no means was he the favorite. He had high points at the 500 in the past, like 2 P4 finishes, as well as some stellar qualifying performances, like his front row start in 2023. But coming into this year, it did look different. From practice 3 to the end of qualifying, Rosenqvist didn't finish outside the top 4 in any session. And he was not only one of the fastest in the field, but he was also one of the most consistent. And he was held in high regards when it came to the pole position conversation. When qualifying rolled around, it was a first in the session of all cars, first in the Fast 12, but only 4th in the Fast 6. It wasn't pole, but it was still a solid result, and out of any drivers near the top, Rosenqvist honestly looked the most comfortable, aside from maybe Alex Palou, so it brought hope to race day when the real prize was awarded. The start of the race was a battle between Palou and Rossi, trading for the lead up until the first caution in the result of Ryan Hunter-Reay spinning in turn 2, and the race only resumed for a bit before Ed Carpenter and Takuma Sato had a run-in, causing another caution to come out. When the yellow dissipated and the drivers that didn't pit stopped, the leaders were Palou and Daly, but after the next round of stops, Felix Rosenqvist was up in second. He got passed by Scott Dixon but lingered behind and stayed ready for an opportunity to pounce. The race was stopped due to rain, but after a restart and another caution, the vital step was made on lap 124, where Joseph Newgarden spun and an alternate strategy was open, and drivers like Pato O'Ward, Marcus Armstrong, and Felix Rosenqvist jumped on it. When the leaders had to pit and the alternate runners were in the lead, Kyle Calais crashed and they didn't have to pit anymore, so the race was on for him. After Calais' crash was cleared and another issue occurred, the top 3 was left as David Malukas, Marcus Armstrong, and Felix Rosenqvist, with Armstrong leading, and there was a 1-lap shootout for the win. The green flag flew, and Marcus Armstrong was passed by both drivers. Malukas controlled the entire lap up until the final straight, and Felix had a run. He pulled out to the side and crossed the line, 0.023 seconds ahead, the closest margin ever, and Rosenqvist became the winner of the 2026 Indy 500. A ridiculous feat and even crazier when you think of the circumstances. A driver who 4 years ago was questioning if he would even stay in the series, winning the biggest race of all, with a team that took its second ever win as a massive underdog. Motorsports are filled with stories of drivers where one decision changed their career, but this time it wasn't a decision of his own. If the Pilot deal had turned out a little bit different, Rosenqvist could have been in Formula E, and none of this could have happened. Was it destiny, or was it just incredibly forged timing?